Welcome to Unexpected Points. I am your host, Kevin Cole, joined by Josh Hermsmeyer. It's Tuesday afternoon. It's 1 p.m. As Denny Carter, for those of you who know him, would say, the Eastern Standard Time, the only legitimate time zone in the country. Josh, where are you coming from? You come from Pacific time zone or some made-up mountain time zone where no one actually lives?
Pacific time, the most glorious football time in all of the world. I think I don't know. I've been in Hawaii to watch the playoffs quite a few times, and I don't know if I prefer 3 hours earlier, like 7 a.m. in the morning to watch football is a little early. So I do believe Pacific is the best time to watch football in all the world.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that as someone who grew up in California. Although my burgeoning international football, aka soccer fandom, appreciates the East Coast time zone where we have games kicking off at 7:30 in the morning here rather than 4:30 in the morning on the West Coast. All right. Enough small talk. No one comes to us for the small talk. No one comes to us for the banter. No one comes to us for our glowing personalities and witty retorts. They come for us for the takes and the analytics and the takes. So that's what we're going to try to have here. We're going to have our biggest questions, topics, ideas, things we need to mull through. We need to bounce off of each other. Coming out of 4 weeks of NFL football action. No longer can we say a quarter of the NFL season, even though I guess technically it wasn't really even a quarter. Well, it's a quarter of the games before when it was a 17-week season, but no longer can we even say that anymore. But roughly a quarter of the way through the season. What do we know? What don't we know? What are we waiting on? What are we overreacting to? And then some other topical stuff that we can dive into some of the nerd shit. Okay, so I put together some stuff that I wanted to talk about, and some of this is like simply to bounce these ideas off of you because I've thought about this stuff. I've been yelled at on Twitter about it. I did not change my opinion about any of it, and now I'm coming back to it again. So I want to start with one very popular topic, whether it's preseason, multiple games into the season. Everyone has a hot opinion on whether or not rookie quarterbacks should be starting immediately, when they should be starting, when they shouldn't be starting. My radar is up in New England, is hovering over New England, where Jacoby Brissett was probably the best veteran quarterback. I guess now people would say Sam Darnold was the best veteran quarterback on a team going into the season. We're 4 games into the season. The Patriots got their week 1 victory against the Bengals. They had a close game that went to overtime against Seattle. But in the NFL, when you have back-to-back blowout-ish sort of losses and you have the number 3 pick overall sitting on your bench, the clock is ticking a bit on whether or not they should make that transition to Drake May. I say, what the hell? I don't really care either way. Go ahead. Why not do it? I guess Gerard Mayo was a little bit questionable after the game. He went and watched the film, and the film said continue to go with Jacoby Brissett, I think is what they're saying now. So that seems to be the direction they're going. What do you say, Josh Hermsmeyer?
Well, I mean, what are you gaining right now by keeping Brissett in at the expense of getting snaps for May? I think that's the question that Gerard is not going to answer publicly, but it's certainly something they have to be talking about internally. And I think from just a purely from a fan's perspective, the better product on the field, I mean, it's probably going to be Brissett. But then there's this whole you want at least one game to watch May be whatever he is, and then so we can come to a snap conclusion about how good he is and whether or not he's a bust. And I think people really want to do that, like really, really badly. And so they're itching to get that take off. But in terms of like actually having a decent product on the field, I think Brissett continues to be the correct answer for the Patriots.
Okay, so the argument against having him start at this point, I think would be primarily about whether or not they can actually protect him. So I'm going to bring up some work from friend of the pod, Ben Baldwin here on his Pass block grades of offensive linemen in true pass sets only. What else? He has some other good graphics here earlier, but let's look at this in particular. So we have the Patriots, who are 28th according to this number. So I think that's going to be where people are going to lean on and say, you know what, let's not get our guy killed. My only problem with that is this number going to get any better in the near future? Has there been a high correlation between this number and starting a rookie quarterback and how well they did versus the pass rush, when we know that sacks and QB hits and pressure rates and things like that are mostly about the quarterback and not about the offensive line? So how much of a factor should this be? Because I think this would probably be the primary factor when it comes to people saying they don't want to start him, because I don't know if anyone's thrilled about Brissett. He's not leading them to the playoffs at this point or anything like that. So I can't really think of another reason not to turn it over at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say your point's well taken about the offensive line and quarterback play and who's responsible for the sacks. But I have them as dead last. I have my own offensive line model that I update every week for injuries and all the rest. And it's also got a little bit of vibes in there, my own kind of tape watching nonsense. And so looking at their team, like it's not going to get better, right? Their right tackle's pretty good. Everyone else is at best lower middle class, and at least three of them are absolute garbage. I have them tied for the New Orleans Saints in pass blocking. So, but again, I don't think in this environment, like we just saw Mason come in last night and saw what he could do, and it's trash. And we've seen other rookie quarterbacks like Bo Nixon's first 2 weeks look really, really bad. I think we're just going to see more of that with May. So again, unless what you're asking for is an opportunity to fire off your post-draft take off of one game, off a rookie quarterback, I don't know why organizationally, like you would want to do this. But from a fan's perspective, from watching a good game, I mean, look at that Dolphins game last night. Look at what we've seen throughout the league in terms of QB play. Brissett is an average QB. He's fine. And if he can't do anything in that environment, I don't know why you would expect May to be any better, except again, just to scratch that itch.
Okay, so one other thing that maybe you could look at is you could say, all right, let's do some schedule timing. People seem to love the prognosticating on when a quarterback is going to start or not start based upon the good old schedule. I think it's kind of overhyped because it's normally like results based. If the team's not playing well and the quarterback's not playing well, then they make the move, regardless of whether there's a good schedule possibly popping up here. They do have the Miami Dolphins, then the Houston Texans at home, technically at home to the Jacksonville Jaguars, but that's going to be in London. And, Jacksonville's this weird kind of home-ish team in London because they go there every single year. And then the Jets at home before a little bit of a road trip after that. So, I mean, that's another factor where I guess if you wanted to lean towards it now. But I guess my problem is if saying we shouldn't start him, right? If the reason you're not starting him is saying, again, like look at the chat here. It says the O-line might create bad habits for May. Why risk May injury with a terrible O-line? They have the worst O-line in the league trying to protect May. Okay. But I like thinking about decisions is if we have a principle, then we have to apply that principle. We can't just like flip the principle later, right? So if our principle is do not start a rookie quarterback when they might get injured or creating bad habits behind a bad O-line, then that would mean don't start him the entire season, right? And then that would mean next year, maybe we still don't start him. I don't know. Maybe we don't go that far, but we don't even know if things are going to change then. So like, how do we apply this principle to May without saying we're just going to sit where our expectation is to sit him for the entire season?
I think things change as you get deeper into the season. I think that when you're seen as a lost cause of a team, the contending teams, or at least the average teams you play, are going to look past you. They're not going to play as hard. It's not going to be taken as seriously. Those are good spots for you to throw in your rookie quarterback. So in the last third of the season, I do think these players are human. They're going to look at a trash ass fucking New England team trotting into town, and they are not going to prepare the same way they would if they were taking on the Chiefs. So it's going to be, it's like when you put in your backup quarterback. Like people are talking all the time. Like I have Bijan Robinson in a lot of leagues, and when Alligator comes in, they are not expecting, the defense is not expecting the Falcons to hand off. This is something that for all his faults.
Who's Alligator? I've missed this whole. Is he known as the
Oh,
Alligator or something?
yeah. No, I'm talking about.
Alligator arms? Does he have little tiny arms?
No,
What's going on here? Okay.
Algier. I hate the
Oh,
guy.
Algier.
I hate him, so I just call him
I
Alligator.
wasn't even sure. Hey,
Yeah.
positive EPA for Algier last week versus
Right. No, and they're
for
crediting him,
Robinson.
and I'm just like, yo, it's clear that they aren't expecting him to do anything when he comes in. Like he's just giving a breather. And then you look at every time Bijan even just does a flare or quick out, like he's got a guy and a half on him. So I think that it's the same case for quarterbacks as you get into the last half of the season. I think that, and especially quarterbacks on bad teams. I just think that it'll be a better spot for May to come in and kind of ply his trade and get those snaps in. I don't think every start should be weighted equally.
Okay, so how about a bigger macro issue, which I think I've discussed probably multiple times in this podcast before, but was being mentioned in terms of like when you start quarterbacks. I know another friend, a lot of friends of the pod, um, Mike Renner. I don't know if I can bring up the tweet, but because I don't know if it was a while ago, but it was basically he said the evidence was overwhelming, quote unquote. I'm going to quote it, even though. Oh, here we go. Oh man, I actually found it. Okay, let's bring it up here, friend, who I'm going to kind of disagree with here. Mike Renner here says the evidence. Okay, no, here's the whole tweet. I'll just quote the whole thing. Back at September 18th, so this has been like 2 weeks into the season. I'm betting we see the pendulum swing back very soon in front office attitudes towards starting rookie quarterbacks. The evidence in favor of sitting top picks for half a season at minimum is becoming overwhelming. Now, I disagree with this. I kind of think it's like they're either good or they're not good. It's pretty random. The guys who play well as rookies are normally good going forward. The guys who don't play well are normally not good going forward. There are exceptions to both rules, but that's generally the case. I assume this has something to do with Caleb Williams starting a little bit slow this season, but then we have Jaden Daniels who started pretty hot this season, and I'm sure no one's upset about him starting early. Do you have any disagreements with me on this one, that this is a very unsolved sort of issue? And I don't think it hurts or necessarily helps to start earlier. I think it's like overwhelmingly about the quarterback himself, and then it might be a factor that's very difficult to measure whether they're starting or not from early in the season.
Yeah, I think this is kind of akin to the argument that's being made about coaching being the definitive, or the surrounding cast being the definitive key in whether or not a quarterback succeeds early on in his career or at any time in his career. And I just don't think there's enough evidence to take a firm stand on these type of things. I think if you have a talented quarterback, as you say, he will outshine his environment, right? He will pull the environment up in the winning direction. Whereas if you have someone who's mid or who isn't all the way there yet in terms of processing and understanding the offense, then I think, yeah, you can make it a lot easier for that guy by having a good environment around him and make him successful by smashing easy buttons. And if you got a dog shit player, then, no amount of, backup planning and contingencies and scheming and all the rest, and having great tools around him are going to make him good. So I don't know how you disentangle all that. It's football. It's just one of those things we say. It's just really hard to know. Now, again, I am totally I'm with you. I want to see May play, like, just selfishly. I want to see what he looks like. I want to see, I want to make my own snap judgments, right? We all do. But I just think, I don't know. I go back to what I said. I just think it's not the right move for the Patriots right now.
All right, continuing to talk about rookie quarterbacks, 'cause this is another thing that I've talked about on the pod, so I don't need to rehash all my arguments. But I want to come to you just to figure out if you have a different opinion on this. Williams versus Daniels, 4 games into the NFL season. I mean, I would pretty comfortably lean wanting to have my quarterback be B. Daniels at this point. B. Jane Daniels at this point. Do you have any different take on whether or not we should wait on this?
I mean, last week I said, is Daniels already better than T-Law, right? And now we're asking the question. I mean, so if he's better than T-Law, then yeah, of course, I think we have to. It has to be in the conversation that you would pick him over Caleb. So I mean,
Is he better than Justin Herbert, Chargers hat wearer?
another great question. One, I would probably come down on the side of he's already shown higher upside than both T-Law and Herbert, right? In four-game sample.
Herbert was
which is
pretty good.
wild.
Herbert was pretty good as a rookie in his second year. Like he showed something that Lawrence never did. So I'll give him that at least.
Did he ever show 14 ANYA? I don't think he did. I mean,
No,
these are
no. I mean, this is a record breaking type of number for Daniels. But my point is, like, he was in the like elite like rookie category for his performance, at least. Now he wasn't in this number, 4 weeks into the season, but he was pretty good from day one. After they, Tyrod Taylor took the knife and the the needle into the lungs, and they got him
he
out
got
of
Wally
there,
Pipp.
and then he came in immediately and started shining. So yeah.
No, he definitely looked good, and there was reason to be excited about Herbert. But like, it's kind of funny. I think there were a lot of draft watchers and kind of film analysts who were a little down on Herbert. I think you pointed out in some of our chats that there were some draft analysts who were a little down on Daniels, and so maybe there aren't as many people who want to give him his flowers right now. But he's putting together the type of beginning to his career that we saw Mahomes put together when everyone was really, really ready to crown him and say, no, let's not talk about regression of the mean. Let's not do any of that shit. This guy is awesome. Let's just recognize awesomeness and greatness when we see it. And I'm kind of like, I was the one who was poo-pooing Mahomes. I was like, oh man, you can't keep this up, right? And now I'm taking the other
You
side.
were right. It just took till 2024 for you for you to be right.
No, it's that the Mahomes is going through that Aaron Rodgers career arc, right? So he'll have a couple down years and then spring back. But I think someone, Ben Gretsch, I was reading Ben Gretsch yesterday, and he was talking about this, and he's like, look, you're probably going to be right most of the time if you say the guy is not as good as what it seems early on, right? But when you miss on the guy who actually is the truth, right? You look pretty stupid. And so I kind of feel like he makes a point here. It's like, just enjoy this ride and kind of let's hope he is that guy, and maybe he is one of the one out of like 10 who shows out like this and then actually continues to perform at a high level. So I'm willing to bet on upside with Daniels.
Yeah. You want to at least say let's put some faith and hope into the bucket where you could get this result, because you're really probably not getting that result out of a different bucket. I think it might help Daniels a little bit that everyone spent the entire summer trashing Cliff Kingsbury and even kind of post week one. So that kind of helps. Like, if you're anti Daniels, you're like, what do I pin the success on? Like, I don't have something else that I can give all the credit to, other than like flipping 180 degrees on Kingsbury.
That's a great point. That's a great point. And it's funny because that's a complete trash organization too. Like they're rebuilding out of the ashes of just a terrible run.
Dan Quinn. People did not like the Dan Quinn hire either.
No, there's nothing in that situation that screams, "Oh, this is what's going to elevate the quarterback," right? No, we just have a dude who's showing out now. Kingsbury's some of his scheming, and again, this isn't from my tape watching, although I did watch the game. This is more from JT O'Sullivan. He's doing some interesting things, like there's some more motion. Like usually Kingsbury's stuff was very static. He's throwing some motion out there, and then he's got some rub plays in there that are really helping out Daniels for his first read. He's seeing the guy open, and he's able to make quick decisions and just fire. Like there's stuff going on here that's helping Jaden, like no doubt about it. So like the people who are saying that scheme and environment is helping are correct, but it's just so funny that it's happening with a dude who they think is garbage, right? Who failed up. So I kind of enjoyed that part.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where I'm of the opinion that for all coaches, if they got extremely high level execution, their ideas would work, right? Their ideas work if you get a very, very high level execution. What's the differentiator is when you're not getting that high level of execution, how do you scheme to have good results where that execution isn't there? And I think that's where people kind of get a little bit messed up is, you see the results or you don't see the results, and then it becomes about the scheme as opposed to probably a little bit more about the execution. And
Yeah,
there's probably some. Oh, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say, here's an example of what you're talking about. I would say it's Matt LaFleur versus Mike McDaniel. Like they both are in tough situations, or they were the start of the year. One of them got 2 wins out of it by, first of all, having the foresight to pick up Malik, and then a capable
Which was a
backup.
move that was critiqued. Like, if you would have said, if before Malik Willis started a game, again, this is why I talk about like predictive, like what's predictive or not, I think is important rather than thinking about. If you would have said, what do you think about this idea of having Malik Willis as your backup quarterback? People were like, that is a horrible move. Of course, they're saying that after like Love got injured, right? Like they weren't even paying attention before Love got injured. And after Love got injured, their thinking was, what are you doing not having a Joe Flacco or someone like that as a backup?
Right. And now in retrospect, you can kind of go back and retcon the whole thing, and you say, yeah, well, in an environment where there aren't a lot of good pocket passing quarterbacks, boy, it'd be great to make the whole plane out of like a athletic, guy who can run or pass, have an out no matter what. Like, and so you see like McDaniel try and do that with Snoop, and it just falls apart because that guy just he just isn't good enough to do any of those things. And also I think that LaFleur's scheme's probably a little better than McDaniel. So I don't know. I think it's interesting. I think that there's something to be said for when the chips are down and coach can actually make a difference and buy your team wins. But yeah, to your point about quarterbacks, I think that's the most important part. Got to have talent on the field.
Well, let's talk about Mike McDaniel because he's someone who, as you mentioned, the contrast between the results without Tua versus the LaFleur results. Flacco came in and looked okay for the Colts. I'm trying to think of other backups who have already played so much. I don't know what it is. I don't know who else, but I'm sure there's
Mason
other.
last night for the
Yeah, or Sam Darnold, they would say. They would say Sam
Sam
Darnold was the
Darnold.
backup. I don't know if he even. I don't know. That's a stretch, but anyway, that's someone you could throw into that category. So McDaniel has always been someone where I feel like there's been of two minds about him because again, if you're willing to project onto the offensive coordinator, offensive schemer, head coach, whoever fills that role within an organization, if you're willing to project on them your reflection of the quarterback, if Tua had all this success the last couple of years, you could say Tyreek Hill, you could say Jalen Waddle, you could say that other stuff, right? But the offensive line is pretty trash. So then you'd say, oh, well, Mike McDaniel's a genius, right? He came up with all these different things, and that's why Tua's been good. Now we have it flipping all the way around, where there's also been a contingent, I think, that's been kind of down on him for a while, but he got this contract extension through 2028 this season. I mean, I feel like he could have been even in trouble of getting fired after this year if things continue the way they are, if Tua doesn't get back for a few weeks, if they're out of playoff contention that early. Is this a situation where, like, how much can we pin on him for a few different things? One, is he doing a bad job coaching? Or is it just luck of the draw sometimes? Like your scheme works with some quarterbacks, it doesn't work with other quarterbacks. Maybe Huntley is at the point now where he's not, he's no longer a Pro Bowler quality quarterback, and he's fallen off a bit from there versus Malik Willis, like took some sort of maturity and step forward in the offseason that wasn't necessarily part of it. Or is he just doing something bad at this point that we really can't put him on? And the one other thing that I'll say is not Tyler Huntley, the Skylar Thompson.
Hmm.
He was really bad when he came in for Tua in the past. So like, how much do we put on him for not advocating for having a different backup quarterback than Thompson, who just came in and was so bad, who looked kind of, you're unable to really save him no matter who's the quarterback. I mean, who's the coach?
Now you're speaking my language. Like the lack of foresight when you have Tua, who's had tons of concussions, he's one hard hit away from potentially retiring. And that's all you got waiting in the wings. I mean, that's just That's piss poor. So yeah, that's absolutely fair game. Um, I think the other part of it is he seems to be really good at finding players that fit what he wants to do in terms of speed, in terms of pushing the edges when he has the personnel to get it done. And Tua was just good enough to operate inside that system. I don't think he needs like a super quarterback. Like I think he's in that Shanahan mold where you just give him a good processor who has enough arm strength and anticipation that he can take advantage of the scheme and then the super fast weapons he puts around him. But what's interesting to me is that the running game has kind of gone south, which is something where he came from a system where that's what the engine, the engine of the offense, like everything goes off the stretch. So I don't know what's wrong, honestly. I don't know. I don't want to speculate. There's some personal things I don't know, but
Oh,
it's
breaking
yeah, no,
news
I mean,
here. Breaking
yeah, I
news.
don't, no breaking news.
Herms
I
Hermsmeyer's
just
got detectives digging through the trash over at McDaniel's Miami condo and has found something.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know, but because it is kind of surprising to me. He seems like a guy who, of all he would be in the top third of coaches. I would think they would be able to find a path through the forest when he loses his quarterback, and he hasn't been able to. So,
Yeah. Again, with this like reflecting on the quarterback thing, like you could have the same people giving him a bunch of credit for Tua, but then if Tua's gone and they stink, then they have to also say it's McDaniel's fault because they don't want to give too much credit to Tua. So you get stuck. You get stuck in a tough place here. I mean, I think the most likely explanation always when there are bad results is a combination of bad play and bad coaching, right? So I think you have to spread it out between those two. And normally the default would be more bad play than bad coaching. So that's where I'm going to stick in this situation. But by no means does that mean is that a way of just wiping off the problems and making excuses for McDaniel. Okay, let's talk the Browns here only because, like, can we fork them at this point? Because this would probably be the first team with playoff, at least, aspirations, a massive payroll, a massively expensive quarterback, a massively expensive edge rusher, um, a lot of money invested in a lot of different places, cap charges floating out in void years out as far as the eye can see. And now we're sitting here at 1-3 with maybe the worst results offensively in the NFL for someone for a team that's had their starting quarterback the entire season, and a defense which has taken a step back, at least statistically, from being the best defense in the NFL last year and close to that the year before. Can we fork them already, moving on from a potential playoff team and maybe contender? Can we already eliminate them first?
uh, can we eliminate them? I don't know if they go to their best quarterback and start him, then maybe they have a
Okay,
chance.
would you go to Jameis Winston? Right? Not would you. Do you think there's any chance they go to? Because obviously you're going to say yes to that. So do you think there's any chance they will do it?
Yeah, another week like they've had with Deshaun. I think they're going to pull the lever. The reason why I say that is I don't think the team really cares about Deshaun anymore. And this is all vibes, this is all speculation, but I don't think that they would like lose the team if they pulled the trigger and went to Winston for a game. Like, I mean, the first chance they get to, I think they take it. Let me put it that way. Let's imagine that he gets dinged up, Watson, I'm speaking of, and he has to come out for a couple plays, kind of like what happened to Levis last night. I don't think he goes back in, man. I think they put in Winston, and I think they see what he can do for a couple weeks. And if Winston is, terrible, if he's completely lost the script and he's throwing, 6 interceptions a game, then yeah, maybe you go back and throw in the towel in the season and just let let Watson get beat up. But there's other things about this team build that is just kind of shocking to me. Like, are you telling me, Kevin, that relying on defense is not something you can do year over year? Is that what you're saying? That's crazy to me. I would have never expected that. And then, like, my goodness, so paying a bunch of guards and you're running back a bunch of money and having him get injured
Nick
and
Chubb
then not being not
has been cleared to maybe come back to practice, so he's going to save the Browns season.
so the saviors, the engines coming back. So like all of these things that like I don't know that I was skeptical of, right? That probably would have looked really, really smart if Watson was good, just have turned out not move the needle. And that just goes back to what we always say. You know, you got to get the quarterback position right. Otherwise, it doesn't matter how smart you think you're being in all the rest of the areas of the game. It just doesn't work. You got your defensive end with 2 bad feet. It's just tough scene.
Yeah. No, I think that's a pretty astute point when it comes to how the team would react to this. And again, this is like the flip side of, I think we on the outside overestimate how much teammates care about, I don't know, like some of the like character sort of things that we care about from these players on the outside. And to be fair, they're more fully formed people to them than they are to us. Um, but also, like I remember when Watson was first traded for and on the Browns, I don't know, he was like taking him on a trip to like the Bahamas or something, different players, and he was being like fully embraced by the team. And it had some ick factor. There's a high degree of ick factor for me, at least, on this. But that's just kind of how these guys are. Now, the context there was this guy's going to be our franchise quarterback and is going to be really, really good. Now, if he's not really, really good, instead of that, you're looking over and being like, this is the guy we're guaranteeing $60 million a year to while I'm earning the paycheck that I'm earning. And it almost flips all the way around the other direction. This is the guy that we had to answer questions about. This is the guy who's underneath another lawsuit that we have that. And the exact opposite starts to happen, which makes it pretty easy locker room wise to make the change.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, no, to answer your question, I don't see how they pull out from this if they don't switch to Winston. And I think they'll take the first opportunity they can to do it.
Now talk about fun. More fun with Jameis Winston playing.
Totally.
That's
I mean,
for sure.
Some would say he's problematic too, but oh man, I Winston chucking it up there is just a far more entertaining product on the field than whatever Deshaun Watson is putting out there.
It's interesting. I was looking at something because I wanted Geno Smith fans to yell at me, where I was looking at like EPA versus grading and who under or outperforms that. So Geno was on one side, his 4 straight years he's underperforming his grading by his numbers. Jameis Winston, the other direction. Any like full season he's had, he's outperformed his grading because you get the turnover worthy plays, right? But he doesn't take sacks and he makes big plays at the same point in time. So I don't know. Like entertainment index is through the roof for this guy. Not to mention the interviews, the entertainment index is through the roof for the sound bites, as far as that's concerned too. So yeah,
hell, the entertainment of just watching him practice, like his strange workouts, it's just incredible.
We need to just like follow him around 24/7. I'm sure he's having some interesting conversations with like, the attendants in the locker room with other people. Like he's a man of the people. Okay. We have to do our weekly check-in with the Vikings, Sam Darnold, capitulation watch on Josh Hermsmeyer. Are we getting any closer there? What's interesting, and I'll mention a few factors here. Really big lead early, some poor play later on, but negligible impact on win probability because they were up by so much, but a couple of, bad turnovers, which ends up flowing through to his grading, and his grading has not been so hot. So like, if you wanted to frame Sam Darnold's skepticism, I think a good way of doing that would be to say, yeah, he's got similar EPA per play to some of the top quarterbacks, but he's also got similar EPA per play to Derek Carr and guys like that, but much, much worse grading than some of these other guys, and is outperforming his grade by quite a bit here. And the other fact that I looked up for them is they've only been trailing for 7 plays this entire season, and they've been leading 85% of the time when he's been under center, which is 20% better than any other team. So playing a little bit downwind, I think, also there. So those would be the points against Darnold. I'm sure you don't need more evidence against Darnold because you're not going to capitulate already on this. I could tell by that wry smile on your face. What are you thinking right now?
Well, not after 4 weeks, but again, I mean, if we're going to be consistent and we say the quarterback makes the team, right, to a large degree, and it's not the surrounding talent so much, it's if you have the guy, you have the guy, then I have to give him credit for 4-0. I mean, that's really good. So like that part, I will, so full stop. Good job. You've done your job. God, it's great to be 4-0. Like that's a great place to be. And you have to give him his flowers for that. Now, The question, of course, is will it continue? I mean, that's the only thing I'm really interested in. Will it continue? And no, I'm still on the train that this is a nice 4 week span, and I don't expect him to perform. Well, maybe I would expect him to perform at the level that his grades suggest, but not at the level that the EPA suggests. But on the other end, I mean, he's got an alien out wide in J Jeff. I mean, I know people were saying that Jefferson's catch, the one where he was completely covered, and I mean, but for me, that was just a great throw. Again, back to giving Darnold some credit. That was a great. It hit J. Jeff in the chest. The ball caught him. I mean, good for Justin Jefferson for being awesome, so awesome that Darnold doesn't mind throwing that ball to him, right? But at the same time, I mean, I give Darnold more credit for that touchdown on the sideline in the end zone than J Jeff. So, but again, maybe I should be leaning into it being all Justin Jefferson if I want to kind of advance my Darnold sucks take. But I have to be fair here.
Okay, so right now, according to our all-knowing, all-seeing betting markets, the implied probability that the Vikings make the playoffs is at about 75%, 75, 80%. So sounds about right. The probability that they win the NFC, let's say, and go all the way to the Super Bowl, they rank behind the 49ers, who are 2-2, behind the Lions, Lions are 3-1, right? Behind actually pretty much equal to the Eagles, who are also 2-2. So if you think about it, like from a team strength ish sort of perspective, they'd be seen as being worse, I would say, in some ways to the Eagles. Although the Eagles probably have an easier schedule since the NFC East is looking pretty trash right now. And then there's a gap down to the Cowboys, Packers, and some other teams there. So it's within the realm of possibility. Maybe it's only 10 to 12% chance that they go to the Super Bowl, but that is something there. So how do you approach this as a front office if you are the Vikings when thinking about, I don't know, midseason trades or different things that you could do to try to maximize, to try to juice that to maximum capacity, and really go in on this season, being that it's the third year of the head coach and the GM?
Yeah, that's interesting. There's what I would do, and then there's what I think Quizzy will do, and I think he will probably lean into it and try and win this year, which is just deeply strange to me. You just drafted a quarterback you don't know much about. You would really need to be confident that Darnold is going to end up being some kind of answer for the rest of the season, rather than what his grades suggest, which is that he's just played competently and better than competently, and that I, the we need, again, we're still in that part of the season where we need to react, but I believe even the betting markets are overreacting here. I think that my prior for the Vikings coming into the season is still hanging on there, and I think there are other teams that are going to go on a 4-game win streak this year. That's going to make this look a little weird. So yeah, no, not buying 75% to make the playoffs right now.
Yeah, I mean, well, their future strength of schedule, according to like current betting market derived power ratings, is 20th, meaning um is easy. The lower it is, the lower the number, or the higher than I'm getting all confused here. So they're on average, it's somewhat poor teams. So under the 20th means they have a below average competition going forward. So that could be giving them a little bit of a propping up going forward because they've had the 8th hardest schedule so far this season, and that that also feeds into to the ratings that we're talking about. I saw an interesting well, it wasn't even interesting, it was perplexing. And maybe if someone understands this, they can mention it in the comments why I don't understand this. But the question was, I think it was being posed by Deshaun Watson's like quarterback coach. I forget what the guy's name is, Quincy Avery or something like that, where he said, "Oh, what do they do with McCarthy if Darnold keeps playing like this?" I mean, I think he's on a 1-year contract. So, like, are they saying you re-sign him and bring him back and don't start JJ McCarthy next year? It didn't quite make any sense to me. I mean, I think like signing Darnold to some big contract seems absolutely insane to me. But I saw someone reply to that saying, "Well, you just sit you sit the young guy, And I was like, "You sit the young." I was just very confused by this whole thing. Do you have any ideas about that? Like in some scenario where Sam Darnold actually played well for the rest of the season. Let's say they make it to the playoffs, they win a game or the playoffs, something like that. Do you entertain at all bringing back Sam Darnold at what would presumably be a pretty decent chunk of change?
Well, Darnold's going to get paid. I just don't see a world where it's the Vikings that'll want to pay that, like because they have McCarthy, because they invested all that draft capital in him. So I don't think they're going to want to, on top of that, pay a big number to Darnold for the years that he'll probably be asking for, probably 3 or 4, probably 3. He'll probably get basically a 3-year deal, and he'll
I mean,
probably
it's pretty
get.
much a guaranteed third round comp pick that you're going to get back on this too, if you're the
Yeah,
Vikings.
yeah, exactly.
If you
So,
don't
and
sign
and
McVay.
I think they're smart enough to take that pick and then not pay that money and then roll with McCarthy and tell themselves a story about how it was the team environment, and that now that they have McCarthy in there, a year under his belt, learning the clipboard, that he can go in there and step in and be effective. So I think I would give that high likelihood of happening, and then some other really poorly run team is going to give Darnold a bunch of money.
Okay, so if we have let's see here. So I got to figure out. I want to pinpoint now when the capitulation is coming for
If he
Josh
keeps
Herman.
this up for another 3 weeks, I will sign whatever apology letter is circulating.
We got a good like make or break ish sort of not breaking make or break, but we got a good little run here because we have the Jets in London this weekend, so that'll be technically an island game for those of us who are awake to watch it. So there'll be that one. Then there's a bye week. Then there's the Lions for your normal early window game, but at home versus the Lions. Then at the Rams versus Indianapolis, Jacksonville, Tennessee, Chicago, Arizona, Atlanta, Chicago again. I mean, I don't know.
After the Rams game.
There's a
After
lot
the
of
Rams game.
W's. There's a lot of W's. Yeah, it seems like the tough part of the schedule is really up until the Rams game, and then you got a lot of potential W's there until you get to the last 3 games of the season against the Seahawks, the Packers, and the Lions. That's a little bit of a challenge, but between that, I don't know. That's when we're going to see if things start to fall apart during that era. Then I think it becomes pretty clear who Darnold is, and that's kind of what I expect to happen. Maybe a little bit like things to be a little iffy. 500 is sort of record against teams that you should be beating, and we'll see what happens there. But could always be wrong. Last one I got before I go to fourth down stuff that you had mentioned is Chiefs offense. What are we doing here? I outwitted myself on this one because last year I was kind of ahead of the curve saying they were going to struggle. Then they were good during the playoffs. Then this year they made some signings and I thought, oh, they'll be back to being good again. And now the Chiefs offense kind of looks worse than it was even last year. Where do we stand on this? Because with Rashee Rice out, Marquise Brown out, Travis Kelce is already just, he's trying to like impregnate Taylor Swift and and be set for the rest of his life or whatever. He's got bigger fish to fry than whatever's going out there. And he's old. And he's old. Well, what do we think is going on there? Because I'm starting to get a little bit worried, despite the fact that they're 4-0. So that's nice. They've racked up those wins. I'm worried. I'm legitimately worried that they won't just be able to flip the switch as they did last season.
So I'm kind of 2 minds. Like, if you're asking, will the offense get better in the near term? I don't think so, because I do think they can sort of flip the switch on Kelce and just make the entire plane out of him again, like they did in the playoffs. Like, I think that is an option that they can and will take if they're forced to. But at 4-0, I don't think they are thinking that way right now. I think they're like, even if we drop a game or 2 in the next 3, we're still fine, right? And so I think they're going to try and muddle through. And I was looking at their cap situation. Like, if they restructure Joe Thuney and Jawan Taylor, they can free up about $20 million this year. That puts everyone in play for them. Like, if they want to get Higgins at some point, if somehow they could convince the Cincinnati Bengals to actually trade with them, then they could they have the room to get him onto their roster and then almost instantly restructure him. The problem with Higgins right now is that his P5, his base salary, is the highest of anyone who might be available this year. His entire salary is base. There's no bonus that Cincinnati is going to eat by trading him, and so or prorated anything. So they're going to have to free up the cap to get him on the roster before they can mess with that contract. And I don't even know if they would want to once they get him, if they have to do Thuney and Taylor to get him on board. But that would be something I would be excited about. I think that Higgins is actually a really good wide receiver. I think he'd be perfect intermediate threat on that team. I don't know if he would be able to do everything that Rashee Rice was doing, but I think he'd be able to do enough. And then maybe, hopefully, you get Hollywood back in the last third of the season. I don't know why this went from IR 4 weeks to rest of the season out. That's crazy, but I would be hopeful that maybe he comes back. So 2 answers. I think the Chiefs will be fine if they decide to press the Kelsey button, although he might get injured or become ineffective because he gets overused. I think that's what they're worried about. But in the near term, I don't think the offense really gets any better.
So my thing is, when we talk about these trade ideas, is 4 weeks into the season, no one is really officially dead at this point, right? Like, the Jaguars are 0-4. So, that's not great. Who else? I guess no one else is 0-4. That's really not great for the Jaguars. But even teams like the Bengals, who are 1-3, I mean, they have a negative 2-point differential. They want to go to the playoffs. They're not really going to be dumping off any players. There are like superfluous sort of players. I saw Jalen Hyatt was put on there. Like, that's the type of player I could see going, because the teams are not necessarily using them anyway. Now, if there are some teams that could fall out, that could say, you know what, I want some draft capital and I'm willing to trade away some players in order to do that. I don't know. Who would those teams potentially be? I guess if things got bad enough for the Jaguars, they could fall into that sort of bucket. If things got bad enough for the Miami Dolphins, they could fall into that bucket. Now, Tyreek making a round trip and coming back seems pretty ridiculous, but who knows? If things got bad enough for the Browns, that's probably
Didn't they just extend Tyreek? I think they did. So there's no chance of that happening.
Okay, but yeah, that was a little chance anyway. But when it comes to the Browns, like Amari Cooper, he can get tossed around now that he would have gone from the Raiders to the Cowboys, traded over to Cleveland, and then back. Like, that's a possibility, especially if they're thinking of turning the page on Deshaun Watson and having to do a reshuffling of everything there. So I think these things are in play, but I guess for me, it's like when you look at the schedule coming up here for the Chiefs, and considering the fact that like I said, no one is like out of it at this point. You still have the Chiefs next week playing primetime Monday Night Football against the Saints, and then you have a bye week. Then they're playing against San Francisco after that. So that would probably be the earliest that anything would happen, would be at least a couple of weeks into the future.
Yeah, agreed. And that's why I think the offense isn't getting better anytime soon. I don't think they're going to want to push Kelsey, and they're not going to be able to make any trades to get themselves better.
Yeah, I mean, if they lose against the Saints, they're still 4-1 going into a bye week, and it's not like the panic mode would not be hitting. The panic button would not need to be pushed at all at that point. All right, let's talk 4th downs. Let's talk some nerd shit. Once again, I'll say friend of the pod, Michael Lopez, has some information up here about go for rates, regular season weeks 1 through 4. I like that we're aligning the weeks here, so we're not getting full season numbers versus weeks 1 through 4 numbers. But long story short is, well, I'll read the whole thing and then we can discuss it. So he says, go for rates on 4th and 1, 70% now, 4th and 2, 43%, and 4th and 3, 36%. Are all on pace to be the most aggressive in league history. Teams in 2024 are as aggressive on 4th and 3 as teams in 2013 were on 4th and 1. Okay, what do you want to say about this first? And then I have my own thoughts on what's going on.
Well, I mean, I'm heartened by this, right? So, we sometimes get a little over eager, and we get over our skis as nerds.
Pun intended with Eric Eager there or no?
Yeah, there you go. No, but we say, oh, the nerds won, the nerds won. But I think this is actually a legitimate case where the nerds have won. Um, you know, people people generally accept that it's sharp to go for it on fourth down now, unless you're like, I don't know, Jim Harbaugh. And so I think that, that's a good thing. I think that in terms of a more exciting game, right? Aggressive coaches doing aggressive things, staying on the field with their offense, the thing we've known for years as Madden players is coming to fruition. So that's great. And seeing it on these larger down and distances, huge gains here. We're going from like, gosh, when I started being involved in football and kind of writing about it, it was like 8.5% on 4th and 2. Now we're 43%. That's amazing. That's tremendous. Like I love that. My question to you is that given that this is kind of the standard operating procedure across the league now, at least to some extent, I mean, is it even an edge anymore to go for it? Is it an edge, or is it more like table stakes? If you're not doing it, you're just putting your team in a hole. But are you really gaining much now by doing the sharp thing? It's a question that people in baseball had to answer for a long time about, all the other things, in the 3-point play in the NBA. You either join or you die, and I think we might be at that point in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the opponent side of the field, for sure, or between the 40s, I guess, that sort of area, it is kind of table stakes Just talking about the Chiefs, which is kind of interesting. I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but I feel like every week there are like 2 Andy Reid decisions where he doesn't he doesn't go for it, but they just continue to win every single time. So I guess for not for everyone, it ends up being table stakes. But what jumped out to me about these numbers, and again, I think it's really hard to separate. This happens in all different sports, right? Even in the NBA, you could look at a chart and you could say, oh, 3-pointers have been going up before analytics became a thing. So like we shouldn't give all the credit to analytics. They say this in other sports, and in soccer, like taking shots closer and closer to the goal was a thing already before analytics. So should we give credit to the analytics? This and that. Now, this is one of the clearest examples, in my opinion, for yes, we should give credit to analytics. And that is because what the modeling does on these fourth downs is it helps a little bit pushing coaches in situations like 4th and 1, let's say near midfield or something like that, pushing them a little bit to do what their intuition kind of understands anyway, right? Like you can kind of understand even at any point in the game, even the first drive of the game, that going for it and not giving up a possession and continuing possession is probably a pretty good idea. Now, once we get out to 4th and 2, once we get out to 4th and 3, once we get out into different earlier in the games versus others, those are the ones that we've seen proportionally go up the most as far as how often teams are doing it. We're talking about 4.5x times what they were doing before, whereas 4th and 1 rates have doubled. Those are the times that you're not getting the feedback as quickly as you're getting on going for a bunch of 4th and 1s. It's not as intuitive. It is something where, yes, it's directed by coaches because coaches make the decisions, ultimately. So, of course, that's happening. But it's something, at least to me, that much more clearly points to this wouldn't have been possible without modeling to put some parameters around this and help coaches wrap their head around it. I don't think coaches ever would have wrapped their heads around going for it at 4th and 3 on their own 48-yard line without the modeling and without the feedback that came from that. That was like a necessary element for this to happen. Whereas 4th and 1, it seems less necessary. Of course, it was helpful that it happened, but it's those type of situations. And if we see it go further, then we'll get into the situations of going for it on your own side of the field, depending upon the score differential and other things like that, in situations that no one would ever think of doing it before. And that will take it even a step further. But we're kind of getting into that gray area where it really is detached from intuition and what you can mentally process, as opposed to what you need to be bolstered by and edified by these models in order to do it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, though, that the reason why I was always so bullish that this would work is that it plays into the idea of being an aggressive football guy. And like, it was very counterintuitive to me that I would always hear excuse making by coaches for why they weren't being aggressive and playing to win. It was always, well, we're doing the smart thing, right? Being conservative, we're taking the points. These kind of statements that to me sounded cowardly and and like the antithesis of what you would expect from a football guy head coach, like so to some degree, this was like a perfect storm. It kind of fits with how these guys perceive themselves, how they want to lead their team. We're going to win. I believe in you. You know what I mean? So I think all of those things kind of contribute. But where I completely agree with you is that yeah, on those those more counterintuitive plays, they've been red pilled. They're certainly bought in now, and they're saying, well, if it works for me on these really short down and distances, I'll listen to the nerds when it comes to these longer ones. I want to be careful about the modeling, though. Like for instance, especially in small sample sizes, if we tout the models too much, you have people who are sharp. They'll go through each play and kind of look at it and go, "Hey, the models are kind of not giving us credit for things they should." For instance, Mike McDonald, I think in Ben's model, is 1 for 3 on fourth downs when he should go for it, but it didn't take into account the OPI when Mike called a fourth down play and there was OPI and they got 10 yards and then he had to punt. But the intent was there. And so we need to be careful about our models. We need to be very judicious in what we account for and what we don't. And especially in small samples early in the season. I think it'll wash out at the end of the day. I'm not throwing Ben under the bus here, but it's once again the case that, context and careful modeling are the order of the day.
One other thing I want to talk about on this that I find pretty interesting is that if we're looking at year over year numbers and even from peak numbers for 4th and 2 and for 4th and 3, 35.5% so far on 4th and 3. It was 19.7 the year before, 24.4 the year before that, only 9.1 before that. So we're like well over the peak. What do we think about the fact that when teams aren't going for it, right? If we're displaying, Ben's model, if we're quote tweeting that on Twitter, the common refrain will be some element of, like my left guard's getting killed, but it's in the larger context, it is, I do not have confidence in my offense, and especially the way the offense is playing in these small samples during these games to get the first down. That factor, the conversion rate mentally is much different in this context than what the base rates are, too much so, I think most people are doing that. What do we think about the fact that teams are going for it a lot more this year, where logically you'd have the least amount of confidence in your offenses this year than you've had in a very long time, because offenses stink, especially throwing the ball, and teams still really like to throw the ball with 3 yards to go and are not very often running the ball in those sorts of situations.
I think it's different. I think that coaches are feeling the strain of not having a lot of confidence in their offensive execution. And so they're grasping for edges, right? And they're feeling like, "Hey, we need to keep this drive going. We need to get rolling on offense. Let's do whatever we can to get that to happen." And so I think that's the motivating factor here and there. And I think it's always been the case that coaches will look for things that they think will give them some kind of benefit. And whereas before, if you thought, this drive isn't worth it, they've got plenty more drives to come. It's a long game. I'll lean on my defense. I think now, especially if you've, strung together a couple first downs and you stall out, you might feel like, I don't know how many more chances we're going to have, like we're not the best at executing. And so, and that might drive some of the decision-making in this kind of offensive environment.
No, that logically makes sense. It's just, again, it's opposed to some ideas of what the logic was for not going for it before. But yeah, that would be like the Andy Reid, right? We don't go for it now. We're down. We'll be down by 4 points. We'll just score a bunch of points later, and it won't end up mattering. You're right that like the one element that maybe people couldn't grasp enough, which is giving up a possession when in a low possession game going forward, once you're half the way or 3/4 of the way into the game, the value of that sort of thing, when you're at midfield or when you're slightly in the opponent's territory, that's like really good versus a lot of other drives that you're having so far this season. So you don't want to let go of that at that point in time. But is it also interesting that that's happening in the context of field goal kickers that are just raining like 65-yard bombs left and right.
That's interesting. And I guess I just go back to the Baltimore Ravens. They had the GOAT and they still were a go for it on fourth down team most of the time. So I think that's more of a fallback position. I think their teams are treating their kickers in the right way. Now, I guess I have to accept the New York Giants here. But the New York Giants are a perfect example, and something that kind of still tilts me when I watch these island games. The announcers at the time were talking about how you have to take the points, right? And they were lauding them for kicking these field goals. And then at the end, right, they go, well, they need to get in the end zone more, right? That's why they lost. They just need to get in the end zone more. It's like, well, you know how you could get in the end zone more is if you don't kick the field goal, if you give it a shot on fourth down. And so I still think there's room for improvement in the conversation around the game, and having good kickers can maybe harm that on these island game telecasts where the announcers still haven't caught up with the way to think about football, and still mock that analytics and mock the new way of thinking about things. So I still think we have a ways to go in that regard, but by and large, I think coaches are onto it. They're hip to the idea.
Yeah, yeah. And one of the things I've always said about analytics and being able to get this very concrete feedback is it does universalize ideas faster than probably in the past, where you needed the mental feedback, edification, and to already adopt it. And as far as announcers and other things go, I mean, it's kind of like you have like analytics nerds. You have the NFL, which is slightly behind the analytics nerds, a little bit behind, marginally behind, and then you get the media that's like way behind even the NFL. So that's always something to keep in mind when we're looking at what the announcers or what other people's reactions are to it. And sometimes maybe we get a little too caught up in the yelling between the people who are not making any decisions, like the former players in the media or the former coaches in the media versus the actual stuff that's going on. But this is another instance where, come on, we're racking up W's over here. We're racking up W's. But the media will move on to talking about something else. All right, Herms, what do you want to plug for this week?
Third week in a row that someone on the buy low was on the Million Maker winning lineup. I think I've had streaks of 6 weeks, but never a streak where the first two I had 2 on the lineup. So we're hot. We're running really hot with the model this year, and go ahead and check it out on airyards.substack.com. It is behind a paywall. It is very cheap, $8 a month, no big deal. So I would encourage anyone who enjoys playing DFS, check that out.
I was looking, I was kind of keeping an eye out for certain. I mean, Pickens 7-1-113, no touchdown though. So that was like a near hit. I feel like, because he was one of the guys you were highlighting, and I was seeing the clips and I was like, ooh, Herms has got another one going here. But I guess it's probably the touchdown that ended up hurting on that one.
Yeah, he didn't. He did. I think he got one called back. I'm not sure. It was close. He almost had a tutty. But I mean, it was one of those things. I even wrote about it in my write up of him. What you were betting on was negative game script for Pittsburgh, and I think they were a road favorite, 1.5 points. So it wasn't likely, but it was in the range of outcomes. And so that's what you were betting on. You got it. And you got a bunch of yards and a bunch of targets. Didn't quite get the tutty. Didn't quite get there. But it was kind of the same thing for Michael Pittman. I had him on the list as well. He had a bunch of yards, got a bunch of targets, just didn't quite cash. So,
all right, everybody, go check out airyards.com. Everything there. Again, it seems like the models are working even better. The Herms models are even working better than the fourth down models. Go check out everything there. Go to unexpectedpoints.com. Follow us both on Twitter, and you'll find at Frisco Josh for him, at Kevin Cole __ for me, dreaded __. Otherwise, I'll probably come back at you later on this week. If not, we'll talk to you next week, rounding up everything that happens in week 5. Thanks so much, everybody.